Hey everybody, we're back. I'm Susan Lindner, the host of the Innovation Storytellers Show. We are diving in today to a very sticky conversation with Jayshree Seth, who is a corporate scientist at 3M and also 3M's first ever chief science advocate. Of course, all of you know 3M is the manufacturer of my favorite product, the sticky note, the Post-it note, the almighty, that which guides us and through all note-taking, all writing, all good things come from Post-its for sure. Jayshree joined 3M in 1993 after a PhD in chemical engineering from Clarkson University and currently holds 77 patents. She is the fourth woman and first female engineer to be inducted into the Carleton Society 3M Science and Innovation Hall of Fame. In 2020, Jayshree was awarded Society of Women Engineers Highest Achievement Award. And in 2021, she became the first ever winner of a Gold Stevie Award in the New Female Thought Leaders of the Year category. Wow. Jayshree is the author of 2 books, The Heart of Science, Engineering Footprints, Fingerprints, and Imprints, and The Heart of Science, Engineering Fine Print, published by the SWE, with sales proceeds going to scholarships for underrepresented minority women in STEM. She was also featured in a 2021 docu-series, Not the Science Type. Jayshree is a sought-after speaker globally on a multitude of topics such as innovation, leadership, and STEM advocacy. And that's why we are so honored to have this conversation that you will not soon forget about today. Jayshree, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I love your favorite product.
They are all over my home. I cannot get away from theirs. There's a pad in every room, without a doubt. So Jayshree, let's start from the beginning. How did you come to this field of innovation? How did you get here?
Yeah, so my journey, I grew up in India on the campus of an engineering institution. My dad was a professor there. And it was just expected of us, my brother and I, that we would become engineers. I wasn't that excited about it. I wanted to work with people. I wanted to solve problems. I wanted to help others. I wanted to improve lives. And that connection of my, let's say, goals wasn't quite clear in STEM fields. It's just not the way those fields were talked about. And I have to say, in fact, even today, we need a lot of work in that area.
Yeah, there's a story that needs to be told for sure.
About, how we communicate regarding them. But long story short, I did become an engineer, came to US for graduate school. And during my PhD program, I actually interned at 3M for a summer. And it was an amazing
chemical engineering now, unlike most of my software engineers on the call. You're in chemical engineering.
Chemical engineering, yes.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. People here worked with other people. They solved problems. They helped improve lives with their innovations. So when I got a job offer, I was like, yes. And I graduated, came back the following summer and started here. And I've been at 3M for 30 years.
Wow. Are you a lifer?
I'm a lifer. I just got my 30-year ring. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you. So it's really been the perfect place for me, for my skill set and mindset, if you will. It's a culture of innovation, and empowerment and collaboration are sort of, embedded in everything we do. They are integrated in all the processes, and they're really woven into the cultural fabric itself. And my PhD is in laser and plasma deposition of diamond-like films. And I joined the division at 3M working on tapes and fasteners for disposable diapers.
Well, so you can naturally see how those go together. Sure, yeah, absolutely.
That's my story, diamonds to diapers. But I really didn't care, even if I didn't have the specific expertise, because I relied on my knack for identifying problems to solve. That's what I wanted to do. Communicating why it would be important, and then collaborating with others to solve them and really bring that innovation to life. And 3M Science Applied to Life is our tagline. So we work to enhance homes and advance customers and improve lives. And so it was a perfect fit. And I must say, I also have an additional role that you mentioned in the intro, Chief Science Advocate since 2018. And so in this role, I advocate for science and for diversity in STEM fields. And we do some work on public perception of science. And it showed us that it was important to step up and advocate for science. And I was asked to take this additional role. So that's how I have that role. And truly, I think it's an example of innovative thinking at 3M to even have this role that doesn't exist anywhere in the company. So that's my story. I'm honored to have reached the highest level that you can attain in a technical organization, that of corporate scientist. And I work to develop new technology and innovative products, and also advocate for science in my additional role as Chief Science Advocate.
How much more is that role needed today, post-pandemic, than pre? I mean, as someone who worked in public health for 10 years, do you feel there's been an erosion of our understanding of what science can bring and does bring to the population every day?
Actually, it's interesting that you bring that up. In 2020, when we did the survey, we found that skepticism went down and trust in science and scientists was the highest it has been.
That was the beginning.
One thing I want to point out is that sometimes we hear from and off a very vocal minority. People saw what science can do. Science was center stage in the story of the pandemic. Scientists were center stage in the story of the pandemic. So science was actually having a moment, really. And so skepticism went to the lowest and trust was the highest. And now in the recent years, we have done the survey again, 21, 22, and going to release the results of 23. Skepticism has had a slight uptick, is back to pre-pandemic levels, but trust in science and scientists still remains high.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. And I'm sure all of my listeners are too, working in these fields. So tell us a little bit about how both innovation gets done at 3M and also the storytelling that winds up accompanying those innovations. How does innovation move through a giant company like 3M?
Yeah, I mean, the process of getting it through everything and to the finish line, I guess, I worked on many, many innovations in my 30-year career. And we have all sorts of processes that have come and gone, but essentially it's a stage gate process for new product introduction. And that's what we follow. And I worked on tapes that keep diapers on wiggly babies to adhesives that go into, planes, trains, automobiles. I would say some have been easier than others. Some were commercially more successful than others. Some were bigger failure than others. But what I've learned is that the innovation journey, like getting through the company, the various departments, approval all the way at a high level, in my mind, always comes down to 5 things. Number 1, initiative. Number 2, inform. Number 3, influence. Number 4, inspire. And number 5, impact. And in looking back to answer your question, I worked on these 5 elements to really get them across. And it all starts with taking initiative. But, many of your listeners are innovators. Chances are you're intrinsically highly motivated. So taking initiative, that isn't your problem. And to bookend it, I guess, number 5, impact. You're likely doing it because you want to have impact. So that follow through, that persistent, that perseverance, that isn't your problem. For many others, these bookends can be the main problem, but not for innovators. However, just having those 2 does not success make. In order for innovation to be successful, it is critical not to miss what comes in between. And it's that ability, that storytelling, to inform, to influence, to inspire, because that's what is needed. So I can go ahead if you want and demystify that a little bit. Is that okay?
Please, yes, because I think, I'm really fascinated by the order in which you've arranged them. Perhaps some of my previous guests would have said, absolutely take the initiative. That's step 1, but you have to inspire people out of the gate. Otherwise, if they're not purpose-driven, for example, they might not be willing to get on board. Tell us a little bit about how you've ordered that conversation.
Yes, no, to me, I work in a heavily technical organization.
Yeah.
People need a certain amount of data and facts in order to be inspired. And a lot of people won't move from where they are at till they feel the influence. And so I distinguish that. You take the initiative, then you inform, you influence, and inspire. And you can do them all at the same time many times. So let's break this down. So the way I like to say it is, inform is about why this, why now. Influence is about what's in it for me. Inspire is about what if. Innovation inherently means you're asking people to do something, even intellectually, do something. So you have to have a good story to communicate why this is important. More importantly, why are you proposing what you're proposing, and why is it important at this time? Why this? Why now? So those are dimensions that have to be integrated into storytelling. Influence is about having an answer to the question people are going to ask themselves, what's in it for me? Everybody asks that question. Innovation inherently means that doing it or not doing it has consequences, but people need to see beyond what you see as an innovator. You just see, oh, wow, this will be so cool. It'll be so good for the company. Why wouldn't we do it? That's great. How will it benefit the people involved? How will it benefit the stakeholders involved? They may see they have a lot more to lose. They may only see the risk. They may only see the challenges. So your story needs to make it amply clear, without spelling it out, what's in it for everybody. And finally, inspire, which is the toughest one. That is about covering the what, so what, now what, but also painting the picture of what if. What if we were able to do X, Y, Z? Imagine what would be possible if we did A, B, C. So these three elements, you know, put together with initiative and impact, I call them the word-wise web, weaving stories for innovation. So you can't just throw data and information on people. They ain't buying. At the end of the day, they need a good story. And I like to say, if you have not sold your story till you have told your story, and telling your story should have three components: why this, why now, what's in it for me, and the what if. And that allows you to inform, to influence, to inspire. And all these words, you will notice, start with the letter I, and I don't take that lightly, because wherever possible, you have to integrate the I in your storytelling. Why am I passionate about this idea? And that goes a long way in influencing others to act. You aren't just introducing or instructing, you're asking people to be involved. So you're sharing unique insights with your story. You are letting them in, letting them internalize this information, and you want that to infiltrate their mind space. If you want to do all that, you have to indulge in storytelling. And people always say, oh, I'm not good at it. We're all good at it. As you know, Susan, it's what experts call unconscious competency that all humans have. We just need to tap into it. And a meaningful story becomes memorable story, because data is short-lived. Stories live on. Stories can be socialized. And we as human beings, we love stories. We have loved it from when we were babies. We love creating them, communicating them, consuming them. And that is why it is important to use in all our communications, to make them meaningful and to make them memorable.
Right. And, you know, I love what you said about influence too, because it is part of this, I like to think of as selfish altruism. You know, we really can't get involved in a project that we think has a high capacity for failure, high potential for failure, unless we know we're trying to do something for the good, but also there's something in it for me, right? What would it look like if I were to be able to be on this team, if and when it works? And as a result, I'm driven. But I'm also asking myself the question, will I get a raise? Will I get a promotion? Will I have greater visibility inside the company? All of these things we take into account also as storytellers when we're trying to convince other people to get on board, especially if they're working at 100% capacity already. And now we come in with this great new idea. It says, yeah, you don't mind working at 125%, do you? You don't mind actually taking your foot off the gas pedal of that highly profitable other thing that you're currently working on to try this really risky thing over here. Yeah.
Totally.
I love how you've somehow managed to altruistically put all the I's together without it feeling like a big bowl of ego. So that's really, it's really brilliant. So, you know, also, you know, but it's even with the best story sometimes, or even with the best idea, there are hurdles to be overcome, whether it's on the communication side or the tech. or the engineering of it. Can you talk a little bit about some of those challenges along the way and overcoming those impediments, the hurdles to innovation?
Yeah, I mean, so essentially, what stories do you tell to get people on board, right? So
Yes.
if I look back, I followed what I just talked about. I tried as much as possible to communicate a story that showed why I was passionate about taking initiative, how I was committed personally to the impact. And they all had elements to hopefully, inform, influence, and inspire others to join in. But if I look back, the methodology that I use, I like to call it mosaic building.
Mm.
And I talk about it a lot, teach it, write about it. I essentially collect tiles of information and assemble this mosaic. And it's a mosaic.
Post-it notes, is that right?
It is a mosaic. It's not a puzzle. In a puzzle, all pieces fit exactly so. A mosaic, it's more organic. You can place your post-it notes anywhere. So I look at it to try to figure out the story it is telling me, because the first person I need to convince is myself, because there's nothing like authenticity that brings passion and makes the story come alive. So I need to be convinced first. And then I use it to build a compelling narrative and invite others to join so we can solve for the innovation. So I take the stakeholders with me on this journey of uncovering tiles, putting them together, readjusting, rearranging, and building it. And once we have them focusing on the learning, they can see how it enriches the journey and then moves them away from this preconceived vision of a march to the end destination. And that's when they become real champions, because it's a process. It may take time for you to get good at it and for others to take note, but it works. And it's one of the biggest challenges, how to get stakeholders more interested in the journey, not just a fixation on the destination.
Yeah.
Because if they go on a journey with you, then success can be defined in many ways. But if they're just looking at that singular outcome, it is difficult. So how do you make them see the possibilities, not just a product at hand? How do you make them see the trends and not just the current status of technology? How do you make them see our commitment to the marketplace, not just to a customer? How do you make them see the passionate people, not just some process they can use to churn innovation? So we have to many times move them from puzzle thinking to mosaic thinking, move them from orchestrated to organic, move them from me to we. And it's a fine balance and give and take. So you really have to take the initiative to build that context, to develop the insights. In fact, for many of your listeners, anybody who has read the book Range, I was fortunate to be interviewed by the author, David Epstein, and he covers my story. I can tell you the page number also because I'm so excited. Page 206.
Yeah, we can put
I'm
it
a generalist.
I'm
I'm a generalist. I'm a problem solver. So this is how I have to solve a problem, because I'm not an expert in any one area. I have to collect all these tiles and organically arrive at the compelling narrative. And I landed in the perfect culture of empowerment at 3M. So it works well for the way I work and the way I like to innovate, taking our science and applying it to improve lives. But really, mosaic building to me is the art of applying science to life. So how do you do this? It's investigative journalism. You find and uncover information. That's the first thing. Everything you want to know about this innovation that you're proposing, you need to look that up. You need to get help to look it up if you don't know exactly how to look it up. Then it's like detective work, right? You ask a lot of questions. Have we done anything like this before? Who has done something like this before? What were the issues? Why did they fail? How did they win? You have to track down leads. You have to observe the clues. And then you become this artist. You're putting all these pieces together. You're trying to see what fits where. What is the mosaic that you have just built? What is the pattern in there? Then you develop this compelling narrative with practice, like a storyteller, to convince yourself and others that this is a problem worth solving. Then you have to learn how to present the case like a lawyer, inspire others to join the cause like a leader. And then, like expert craftsmen, you have to work as a team on very specific tasks, using the right tools, and really taking and inventing the technical solutions that are needed. But you also have to paint the vision of where to go next. So that's the story that always sticks in my mind.
That's fascinating. As an anthropologist, that kind of investigative journalism approach we call appreciative inquiry.
Appreciative inquiry. Good to know.
And this is a science of really understanding how not just we go and look for data, but also how we absorb and listen to it. So we become really attuned to the biases we may have in that listening. And we try to view these individual tiles, like you say, okay, how do we actually prioritize the voices that we're hearing? How do we check for our unconscious bias? How do we look at the pieces where we can really hear and become expert listeners? Because sometimes, especially in the innovation field where there is this quiet devil on our shoulder endlessly talking about ROI, right? We sometimes want to zoom ahead to the end as opposed to the learning like you're talking about, and get to that impact, get to the ROI, get to be like the next hero, right? On the quarterly earnings call 3 years from now, when we have a cool new product that's in the market. And so that starts off with that appreciative inquiry and really understanding who we're talking to and what's driving that. So I love that. At this moment, corporate innovators are facing big challenges. I know just sending out my newsletter, I noticed that a team of telecom executives all dropped out of my newsletter. It says I am no longer working for insert telecom company name here. And those were my folks on the innovation team, on the innovation sales team. So these were the guys who were telling the story of innovation at this large telecom company. And my heart just broke because these were the frontline storytellers. So what do you think the challenge is today, or what do you think the role is around innovators in large corporations today?
Yeah, I mean, times are changing. It's something interesting that you just mentioned, reminds me of one thing, if I could go back to one thing. In storytelling, there's the story and there's the telling.
Yes.
And so we have to also make sure that we are doing a good job at the telling part of it. And something that you said made me think about it. And the way I like to say it is, anytime you're talking, pay attention to your talks. T is for the topic, A is for the audience, L is for the layout, K is for the key points, and S is for the story. And you have to make sure that you're taking into account all of that. And I know your audience might have figured this out by now. I love the acrostics.
We're all still learning.
But they're just make things memorable. I talk a lot about these things in my books, actually. So thanks for mentioning them. As you said, all proceeds go to a scholarship for underrepresented minority women in STEM. So please buy and spread the word. It's a win-win. You give the gift of education. But I think it's very important to understand your audience and what they want to hear. And you have to have the glue that holds the facts and the data and the insights together and communicate it in a way that compels action. So narration is also critical, So to your point on linking these two things, what I try to use, regardless of what time we're in and what's going on with innovation and all of that, is framing and reframing. Because people may say, we don't want to do that because we did this and it didn't work, or we don't want to do that. So you have to reframe constantly given the current priorities. So it requires thinking on your side. Okay, they won't do it because of this. They won't do it because of this, because right now they're caring about this. But wait a minute, this could lead to that. And that's important right now. And that's how the iteration of the story and the reframing work. And knowing the story lends credibility, because people are thinking about what they think they know and not paying attention to you. So you have to address it head on. I know we've tried this before and we have failed, but here's why I think blah, blah, blah. The second thing is answering all the questions that they may have, but they're not vocalizing, right? Very important. We have meetings, but there a lot is left unsaid, till you reach the water cooler, right? So you've got to make sure you are proactively doing that. And then questioning everything that you're communicating. Like, you must be wondering, while we're having this situation, why am I even talking about innovation? Having the humility to acknowledge the audience's collective wisdom. So I often use things like, wait a minute, Jayshree, aren't competitors already doing that? That's what you must be thinking, but I will tell you blah, blah, blah. And so posing that question makes them feel great, even if they weren't thinking about that question, but it shows that I've thought of it and then they may think of it. So yeah, it requires some solid homework, because, you can really have to make the story relatable. You have to engage them with unique insights that are actionable, and you can get them to ask questions and encourage their curiosity. That allows them to rise above the data and information to knowledge and wisdom. And that's where you can get the decision. So based on where the wind is blowing on the corporate environment, you have to be careful before you call something new. This is something I've often seen people struggle with, because you may have come up with something that you think is new. And when you're with, let's say, your technical folks, sure, you can say it's new or novel, and people know how to process it and place it. Technical people, in my experience, are much more comfortable with risk. It's part and parcel of the scientific process. But it's possible if you go to someone in business, given the current corporate environment, and say, let's do this new thing. It's quite possible you just scared the heebie-jeebies out of them, because new spells risk.
Right.
So you have to make it relatable to something else, somebody else, somewhere did, or make it sound like completely consistent with current strategy, or, just don't focus on the newness. I've seen people fail again and again because of this. People think, oh, everyone should be excited about new. Well, that isn't what everybody's geared for. That's not what they're wired for. So you need to know what is new about what you're suggesting and what is known, and have the right balance of new and known and the wisdom to communicate it appropriately. That's what's important at times like this, because right now, innovation might be scary to a lot of people. And you have to make sure that you have the right story and the right storytelling, so that you can open heart and minds and connect people and inspire change and cut through the noise. And boy, is there noise these days. So in order to inspire, I use story words. I use quotes and proverbs and metaphors and 2x2 and weave them into the storyline. And then practice with people, and make sure that, people don't think you are tone deaf or don't understand the issues that they have or the struggles they have, etc. But a good story still works. I think it was the vice president of Disney, I think, Susan, that one said something like, the reason why Solomon was the wisest man is because he had stories. And at the end of the day, all of us in suits, we are all hungry for a wise person to tell us stories. So,
well, I often, like to remind my corporate clients that strategy is just a story until you start executing on it. It is literally a fiction, right?
yeah.
It is a plan to go somewhere, just as much as any other tall tale that we tell ourselves about where we're going to be by the end of this fiscal year, right?
Yeah.
So then we tell an innovation story, and if we're smart, we'll weave these two things together so that people can move forward. But words like disruption, innovation, and change trigger in 90% of the population, is my guesstimate, a cortisol response and an absolute stress-induced response for a lot of different reasons.
Yep.
We know that change makes people feel terrified. Even if it's going to the supermarket and wanting to get vanilla ice cream, and you want the Haagen-Dazs, but they're all out, that alone just goes, it causes a kink in the network, so to speak. And now I got to think about something else. So that's a low stress. But if you're asking people to take their foot off the accelerator of something that's working and to try something that's completely unproven, it's stress inducing, even if we think it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, no, it's certainly true. I mean, the bandwidth right now is fairly low. Short-term thinking is pervasive. I have jokingly say people literally shun innovation these days.
Yeah,
because,
absolutely.
they just don't have the resources are tight. There are so many sort of supply chain challenges. And when all these challenges come, people start sort of receding and just thinking small and getting in silos, and culture erodes. And but I remind people, these are the times when you can spend some really good time in building a stronger story. And putting all the time into an effort into building a story that soon enough everybody will need, because the only way out is innovation. At the end of the day, if you want to grow, you have to innovate or die, right? So, and I tell people, don't worry about it if you've got revolving door of leadership and it was this person today and then that person tomorrow and this and that. because stories can be socialized and stories can live on even after the leaders leave. And that's what you want. So you have to become the soothsayer and the fact finder and the storyteller in your journey.
Yes, 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 and yes, because they do in fact live on. You know, when I talk to audiences, I talk about the prophets as being the greatest viral storytellers of all time because, you know, 5,000 years later, we're still quoting Moses, right? I mean, when you look at the greatest prophets who have come to us and told us stories that we follow, it's thousands of years later, we're still telling these stories. And I think the turnover in some of these structures and our specific institutions have certainly changed over the last 3 to 5,000 years. And yet the story still lives on.
Yep. And if you can make the story live on, people will enter an organization and they'll hear everybody talking the same thing and they'll think, oh, there's something to this story. I better not disrupt the story. Let me see what tiles I can bring into this mosaic and how can I help, you know? And so positioning and the way you communicate is so important. And sometimes people just don't realize that, how much weight it carries if you are able to communicate the history, the civics, and the geography of the situation, right? What has happened in the past? What is the politics? And where are we going? And what's the lay of the land? So communicating in stories is essential, even when you're ordinarily communicating, I think, because people miss the context when they're cycling through these different jobs at rocket pace, you know?
Right. You know, this is a process that I like to call breadcrumbing, where you're really creating these little breadcrumbs as a connection to the past. These are the brilliant investments we've made in the past. These are the giant leaps in technology that we've made already. Just look where we've come from the 1970s till now, from this technology until today's. And people can look back and go, hey, yeah, we did it. We did do that. We did make that bold investment. And therefore, taking the next right step into this big, bold future. We don't have to aim on the big future just yet, but we can take the next right step and it's not so scary because we've done it before. And that kind of thinking allows people to say, okay, one foot in front of the other. I'm willing to even approach first that iterative innovation before I tackle the moonshot.
Right.
That will get us there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to show where you're going and how you're going to get there. And what do you propose is what we can do tomorrow. And I think another thing that is very critical is times like this, people should really put some emphasis on building social capital. Because innovation requires social capital. It's the bonds, the bridges, and the linkages, right?
Yeah. What does it look like?
And it's when there is more asynchronous work, you're not running into people when people are working remote. So you're not having the water cooler conversations as much as you used to have. And a lot of things have changed, and change is bringing opportunity. But if you're all alone and you're not interacting with people, you kind of are not building the social capital. So you may have this great idea, but when you bring it forth, you don't have the bonds, you don't have the bridges, and you don't have the linkages to make change happen. So bonds are with your in-group, right? These are people that you work with all the time, or you understand, or somehow there's a strong affinity. So for me, it would be like my technical community, my R&D community. Bridges are those with outside of however you define the said group. And so that would be like manufacturing or marketing or sales. And linkages are the connections with hierarchy. And in my experience, these allies are very critical as you socialize the idea. And the real skill here is to attain that right balance between bonds and bridges and linkages in tune with the way we work today. If you have very strong bonds, but you don't have bridges and linkages, your idea might fall flat because you never made an ally in the business or the marketing or the sales or the manufacturing or the quality organization. If you have bonds and bridges, but you have no connection to linkages, people will be like, I don't know about this, you know, unless a manager steps in and says, you know what, I really like this because of this, this, and this. So you have to make sure you do all of this. And people go, well, that's politics. It's not politics. Do you want to be effective or not? Do you really care for this innovation or not? Do you care so much about this that you are going to set your ego aside and actually work with people, that's what it needs. And each of those interactions will require authenticity, it will require humility, and it will require storytelling.
Mm, fantastic. I work with a group called Catalyst Constellations.
Mhm.
Day 2 of a training is creating a network map. And it's understanding by varying degrees, who are the people who are currently in my network? Who are the people that I need to put in my network in order to achieve the change as a catalyst that I'm looking for? And so figuring out that who's currently here and what's the story they need to hear and who's not even on my map yet. And I think it was really such an amazing opportunity to think about also, where's my support system? Who else will back me up on this brilliant idea? And if I'm not building that network, almost like a spider web, right, of the people around me who will cocoon this idea as we try to shuttle it through what could be some really tough times, then this great idea could fall through that web too. So I love this idea, and really planning it out, not just who's in my immediate circle, but who else do I need and who else can I turn to for support? Because innovation does not happen with one sole thinker. I think we have this bizarre idea that it's one Steve Jobs, one Bill Gates that makes like something like this happen, and it
never is.
never.
Never is. It takes a whole village and then some.
That's right.
And it also, the best part about it is that as you interact with people, your story gets better and better because you integrate the point of view that everybody brings. And then when you put that mosaic up, everybody sees themselves in that story. And that's what you want for it to be successful. Right. So that humility is also extremely important. Everybody will know at the end of the day you were behind it, but you don't have to spell that out. And that comes with practice. That's and right. Comes with working with people. So I really think these are important times right now to build the social capital, help people in where they need help. And that's the best way. Working with people is the best way to network. I know in the technical community, it feels like a dirty word. And I agree. I've never in my 30-year career ever had a networking meeting. But have I talked about my work with a lot of people? Absolutely. So my network is my net work. Right. So I think that's what, and people get worried about small steps, but these times you can take the small steps and still keep the vision on that innovation that you're thinking about for the future. You know, I always tell people about the Ever Given saga, you know, the Ever Given that was stuck in the Suez Canal, and we were mesmerized in watching this huge, big container load ship just stuck and wedged. And how do we move it? You know what moved it? Tiny excavators, small ditch diggers, little tugboats, and even the gravitational force of a heavenly body. So
that's right.
Every little action counts, every voice matters. So you've got to keep people inspired, and you've got to connect it to purpose like you started out. You know, the way I like to say it is, now more than ever before in our lifetime, innovation is a lifesaver for business. Inspiration is the lifeblood for innovation, and purpose is the lifeline for inspiration.
Oh, I can't imagine it better said, Jayshree. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to ask you my 3 hot seat questions. So tell us, what do you think is the greatest innovation of all time?
Of all time, I will have to go with the internet.
Yes. Yeah, there's no avoiding it, is there?
No, of all time.
And if there's an innovation team that you could have joined throughout human history, which would be most exciting, most interesting to you?
I will struggle between Bell Labs or Palo Alto Research Center. I guess just so many cool things came out of there. And it's so funny, even now we can trace many of the things back to those labs. So that would have been a fun environment.
Is there something in particular that came out of either of those that's like, wow, like that?
Everything. You name anything, it can be traced back to those labs.
Yeah. And lastly, what is something that drives you crazy, or something you simply wished existed in the world that doesn't today? What would you like to see invented?
How about a time machine? That's what I want. Because I want to go back in the past and I want to go into the future and then learn from both places and do it in the present.
Mm. Any particular year you'd like to stop on going backwards?
I want to see the most sustainable practices that the natives had at that point. People who were stewards of the earth, not, looking at it like we do now. And what are those practices? What are those sustainable practices that we can incorporate today the best we can, so we can ensure that we have a good future for the next generation and
Amen.
beyond.
I think about that every time I go for a walk. This where I live, right outside of New York City, is a home of many different Native American groups. And I think, what would it have been like for them to walk along the Hudson River back in the day? What kind of medicinal plants would they have found that I pass by and have absolutely no idea about, that could be curing something that ails me in the moment, or helps me sleep better, or gives me more energy in the course of my day, that just I might be able to just pick up a leaf and chew on, and suddenly life would be made better. And so much of that knowledge is lost to us today. I love this idea of the time machine. That's brilliant.
Yep, thank you.
Jayshree, if people want to get in contact with you or find your books, what should they do?
Follow me on LinkedIn. I'm there almost every day, and my books are available on Amazon. I really, really hope people buy them. I have lots of tips and tricks and things about science and humanities and culture and leadership in there. Both of them are on Amazon. And spread the word. Tell the stories. The world needs innovation.
Hear, hear. Jayshree Seth, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Susan.